Today we're going to talk about relative clauses and main clauses and the four possible ways to combine them. So as we know, we have object-focused relative clauses and subject-focused relative clauses, which depend on how the relative clause is combined and the role of the relative pronoun in the clause. Now both these types of relative clauses can be used to modify the subject or the object in the main clause. Sometimes this is confusing. The words we use to describe them can be confusing, so today we're going to look at an example of each combination. So the sentence we're going to start with is the man is fixing the bike, like in the picture. This is going to be our main clause. Like most sentences in English, this sentence has a subject, the man, a verb, is fixing, present progressive, and an object, the bike. And most sentences in English have subject, verb, object, word order. The next sentence we're going to look at is the bike needs new wheels. Clearly there's no wheels on this bike. So likewise, this sentence has a subject, the bike, verb, needs, and an object, new wheels. Now we're going to use the second sentence to make an adjective clause or a relative clause that modifies something in the first sentence. So to do this, we're going to change the subject, the bike, into a relative pronoun, which. And then we're going to put the relative clause right after the noun that it's modifying, the bike. You'll notice that the bike and the bike, these are the same thing. So this is what we'll be modifying. So our sentence looks like this. And notice this is a subject-focused relative clause because we've changed the subject. So when we put it into the main clause, subject-focused relative clause looks like this. We put it in the main clause, we have the man is fixing the bike, which needs new wheels. So our main clause has a subject, verb, and an object, and we're describing the object with our relative clause, which is still in the subject, verb, object order because our relative pronoun is the subject. How do we know? Well, there's no other subject in the relative clause, so the relative pronoun must be the subject. And we saw that in the original sentence, which replaced the bike, which is the subject of the verb needs. So again, this is a subject-focused relative clause, which needs new wheels, which is modifying the object in the main clause, the bike. This is the first combination. Let's look at another one. Again, we'll start with the same main clause, the man is fixing the bike, and this time we'll use a different sentence to change into a relative clause. I bought the bike. Notice, again, this sentence is in subject, verb, object order, but in this case, the bike and the bike are both objects. So the second sentence we're going to make into an object-focused relative clause. How do we do that? That went a little quickly. Well, the bike we're going to replace with the relative pronoun, which. Now to make the relative clause, we must move the relative pronoun to the front of the clause, like this. So our relative clause, our adjective clause, same meaning, different terms. So our relative clause is which I bought. Notice the order has changed. Now we have the object first, then the subject of the verb, I, and then the verb bought, which I bought. This we call an object-focused adjective clause because the relative pronoun, which, is acting as the object in this clause. The subject is still I. So when we move this to be part of the a relative clause in the main clause, part of the other sentence, remember the adjective clause always goes after the noun it's describing, in this case the bike. So we put it right after the bike. The man is fixing the bike, which I bought. So notice, in the original sentence, still subject, verb, object order, and we're modifying bike. We're describing the bike, which is the object in the main clause. But our adjective clause, our relative clause, is an object-focused relative clause because the object is the relative pronoun. The relative pronoun is the object, which is different from our first example. Now, the other possibility is we can use both kinds of adjective clauses to modify the subject. Let's look at an example. So we take our original sentence, and then we're going to take the man is my friend. So this time we're going to describe the man with our adjective clause or relative clause. So how do we do this? Well, we take the man, we replace it, the man is the subject, And of course, like most English sentence, subject, verb, object order, we replace the subject with the relative pronoun. In this case, we'll use who. So we have who is my friend, and the relative clause is ready to insert into the main clause. And like we said before, you always put the adjective clause, the relative clause, right after the noun it's describing. So in this case, we're describing the subject. We have to put it after the subject, like this, because it's a subject. And like we said, this is a subject-focused adjective clause because the relative pronoun is the subject. So here's where we put it. The man who is my friend is fixing the bike. So in this case, right after the subject, we have our subject-focused adjective clause, who is my friend. Then we have the main verb, is fixing, and then the object in the main clause, the bike. So this is a subject-focused adjective clause because who is the subject, modifying the subject in the main clause, the man. Now you can probably guess by now the fourth combination. We can use an object-focused adjective clause to modify the subject. Let's look at an example. The man is fixing the bike, same original sentence. And now the sentence we'll use is, I know the man. So again, this is subject, verb, object. I is the subject, know is the verb, and the man is the object. Now we're going to modify the man, and in the second sentence, the man is the object. So we're going to replace that with the relative pronoun whom, a little bit formal, but that clearly marks the object. Now to make the relative clause, we must move the object, the relative pronoun, always move the relative pronoun to the front of the relative clause. So we do that like this, whom I know. Now you notice the order has changed a little bit. It's object, because the relative pronoun whom, then the subject, then the verb. So it's object, subject, verb. And since the relative pronoun is an object, we know that this is an object-focused adjective clause. Again, we're going to use this to modify the subject in the main clause. So when we move the relative clause, the adjective clause, up into the main clause, it looks like this. The man whom I know is fixing the bike. So again, an object-focused relative clause, whom I know. We know whom is the object because I is the subject, and we know the man was the object in the original sentence. But here, it's modifying the subject, the man, in the main clause. So we have the man, the subject of the main clause, the object-focused relative clause, or adjective clause, whom I know, and then we have the main verb, is, fixing, and then the object of the main clause, the bike. So this is the fourth combination. Let's look at all of them one more time. In the first sentence, we have the main clause, the man is fixing the bike, subject, verb, object. And then we have a subject-focused adjective clause, which needs wheels. Here, which, the relative pronoun, is acting as the subject. Which needs wheels is modifying the bike, so it goes after the bike, after the object. We can also have the man is fixing the bike, which I bought. So again, in the main clause, the man is fixing the bike, same order, but in this adjective clause, the relative pronoun is the object, which. I is the subject, and bought is the verb. So this is an object-focused adjective clause because the relative pronoun is the object in the relative clause. And this one is also modifying the object of the main clause, the bike. We can also use both kinds of adjective clauses to modify the subject. So, the man, who is my friend, is fixing the bike. In this case, we have a subject-focused adjective clause because who is the subject, the relative pronoun is the subject of the adjective clause, who is my friend, but we're modifying the subject of the main clause, the man. So we have the man, who is my friend, is fixing the bike. Finally, we can have the fourth combination. The man whom I know is fixing the bike. In this case, we're again modifying the subject in the main clause, but in this case, it's an object-focused adjective clause because the relative pronoun whom is the object of the relative clause. I is the subject, and know is the verb. So notice in the second two examples, the relative clause or adjective clause comes right after the subject and it's kind of in the middle of the sentence. It can be a subject-focused relative clause, like in our third sentence, where we have subject, verb, object, order, or in the case of an object-focused adjective clause, we must move the relative pronoun to the front, which means the object is in the beginning of the relative clause, and we get object subject-verb order. In the top two examples, it's the same thing. Subject-verb-object order in a subject-focused relative clause, or object, subject-verb, in an object-focused relative clause. But in the top two cases, we're modifying the object. All four of these combinations are possible. These are all correct sentences, and these are all things you can do with adjective clauses. But I hope that this combination, especially the color coding, can help you see that all four of these combinations are possible. Subject-focused relative clauses or object-focused relative clauses can modify the subject or the object of the main clause. So those are relative clauses and main clauses, the four possible combinations. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching.